So I'd like to start just by asking you all a question. How many here are receiving some sort of federal assistance for paying your tuition or expenses here? I just want to see how many are paying attention because I know it's a pretty good number. I had the same thing when I first started with college, that there was this monumental dollar amount that how was I going to be able to pay to get through college? And I think that even our opponent would agree that higher education is a benefit to society in general. The College Board, in their Education Pays 2010 publication, identified that students who attend institutions of higher education obtain a wide range of personal, financial, and other lifelong benefits. Likewise, taxpayers and society as a whole derive a multitude of direct and indirect benefits from when citizens have access to post-secondary education. It's obviously a benefit for us as a society to make sure that we have an educated, not just K-12 education, but higher education behind our populace so that they can make informed decisions and rational decisions. Unfortunately, the cost of education is always a problem. The U.S. Government Accountability Office, in their study on federal student loans, patterns in tuition enrollment, and federal Stafford loan borrowing, which covered the time frame from up to 2007 to 2008, identified that although post-secondary education is vitally important to many individuals and the nation's ability to compete globally, high college tuition rates are prompting concerns that obtaining higher education and post-secondary education may remain an elusive goal for some. And as you all know, with the economy, the way that it is, family incomes are declining, and yet, as our opponent says, tuition continues to rise. The College Board, in their Trends in College Pricing 2011 edition, identified that in 2010 the average income was lower at all levels across the board in the studies that they did than it had been just a decade earlier in the year 2000. And those declines ranged from 16%, and this is inflation-adjusted dollars, 16% for the bottom 20% of families, and it was a decline of 11% for the top 5% of families, and about 3% for the 60th to 80th percentile of people. So we've got this gap between family incomes are declining and college tuition prices are increasing. So how do we bridge that gap? Well, the current policy has been that the federal government has been the primary supplier of making sure that students had availability to student loans, not necessarily just giving them money, but the topic we're specifically talking about is federal subsidies, which means the federal government is paying the interest on the loan while the student is in school and up to a period, typically about 6 months after they graduate, as long as they maintain minimum GPA and credit requirements. The problem is that because we are so heavily invested in this federal system, it's going to be a huge cut at the knees across society to have the federal government removed as that main source. Again, the College Board tells us in their Trends in Student Aid 2011 edition that in 2010-2011, 46% of all grant aid and 51% of undergraduate grant aid came from the federal government. So it basically means that half of all the grant aid that was given by the federal government to help students go to school, and we're more reliant on that now than we were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, those numbers were around 30%, not 50% where they're at now. So it's going to have a huge impact on this nation's ability to send students to school. Additionally, the states, because of their funding cycles, in the Trends in College Pricing 2011 edition, the College Board tells us that the state appropriations for a full-time equivalent student, which is basically how much money a state gives to a public university in their state to operate the school, those have declined by 9% in the 2008-2009 cycle, another 6% in 2009 and 2010. And with those declines from the state level, it means that public institutions aren't getting the money that they need to help operate the state school systems. So we're now dealing with who do we look for and who we've been relying on. It's still the federal government. Our opponent would have you believe that the increases in the loan limits would somehow tie to the tuition costs of the schools themselves. But specifically, the the U.S. Government Accountability Office, in their Federal Student Loan Report, 2011 Student Loan Report, identified that when the legislature increased the loan limits in 2007 to 2008, the price and the number of undergraduate students enrolling in the nation's universities did not significantly spike. The price didn't go up, the number of students didn't go down, there wasn't a direct impact there. It was increased at a generally consistent rate with the way it had been in prior years. And additionally, we see that the College Board has identified that in their 2011 trends in college pricing, the College Board identified that tuition at public colleges and at private colleges is adjusting at different rates. So if the federal subsidies, if the cap on the federal subsidies was raised and students could borrow more money, and that had a direct relationship to what the tuition was at the universities, that increase would be seen across the board, not with a disparity between the public and private institutions. So, also, what is not really been addressed and will likely come up is private loans are available for students to go out and pursue, but outside of state or federal grants or subsidies. Unfortunately, those loans are primarily higher in percentage rate. There's no protection while they're in school for the student to not have to pay that back when they're a full-time student. And those are typically considered backups to the federal student loans because of the higher interest rate and the increased costs. And 53% of dependent undergraduates who got private loans had already borrowed to the maximum federal Stafford loan amount and then therefore had to go into getting a private loan. Thank you.